In the course of Christian history, the Apostle Paul stands out as one of the most influential figures, renowned for shaping the faith as it is known today. His transformation from a vehement opponent of Christianity to one of its most ardent promoters is a testament to the profound changes that can occur through personal conviction and divine intervention. However, while Paul's influence on Christianity is universally acknowledged, his encounters with different cultures, particularly his visit to Greece, provide a deeper understanding of the challenges he faced in spreading the gospel. This video will explore the historicity of Paul's mission during his time in Greece, focusing specifically on the opposition he faced from the Greeks. It will analyze the broader context of Greek religious and philosophical beliefs, their contrast with Christian teachings, and how Paul responded to these challenges without forcing his message upon his listeners. By exploring Paul's encounter with the people of Athens, this part of exploration will also delve into the theological, cultural, and philosophical implications of his mission, which ultimately shaped the spread of Christianity in the ancient world. Before analyzing the specific historical event of Paul's visit to Athens, it is important to understand the context of Paul's life and ministry. Originally known as Saul, he was a Pharisee and a fierce opponent of early Christianity. He is best known for his dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus, an event that transformed him into one of Christianity's most significant figures. From that moment forward, Paul dedicated his life to spreading the message of Jesus Christ across the Roman Empire, establishing numerous Christian communities, and writing letters that would later become integral parts of the New Testament. Paul's ministry was marked by his relentless journey to spread the gospel, even when faced with persecution, imprisonment, and eventual martyrdom. Despite his profound influence on Christianity, Paul's message was not universally accepted, particularly among those who adhered to different religious beliefs. His time in Greece, especially in Athens, serves as a striking example of the opposition he encountered: the Greek religious and philosophical landscape. At the time of Paul's visit to Greece, Athens was one of the leading cultural and intellectual centers of the ancient world. The Greeks had a deep reverence for their gods and a rich tradition of philosophy that had shaped their worldview for centuries. Their pantheon of gods, which included Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and many others, was central to Greek religion. The Greeks believed that these gods controlled the forces of nature and human affairs, and their religious practices were deeply embedded in everyday life. In addition to their polytheistic beliefs, the Greeks were also home to some of the greatest philosophers in history, such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Greek philosophy was characterized by an emphasis on reason, logic, and the pursuit of knowledge. Philosophers often debated the nature of existence, the universe, and the gods, and their ideas influenced not only religious thought but also the structure of society. When Paul arrived in Athens, he was confronted with a people who held their gods and philosophers in the highest esteem. Greek religion and philosophy were not just academic or intellectual pursuits. They were deeply woven into the fabric of Greek identity. The people of Athens were accustomed to debating and discussing ideas, but their reverence for their gods and philosophical traditions made them skeptical of new teachings that contradicted their established beliefs. Paul's approach in Athens, as recorded in Acts 17, provides a fascinating glimpse into his mission and his strategy for engaging with those who opposed him. Upon arriving in the city, Paul was troubled by the prevalence of idols and the worship of various gods. The Greeks' religious devotion was evident everywhere, and Paul's message about the one true God who had created the heavens and the earth stood in stark contrast to the polytheistic beliefs of the Athenians. Paul began his ministry in Athens by reasoning with the people in the synagogue and the marketplace. He engaged in discussions with both Jews and Gentiles, and his message was one of monotheism, the belief in one God who created all things. He also spoke about the resurrection of Jesus, a concept that was particularly difficult for the Greeks to grasp. In Greek thought, the resurrection of the dead was an alien concept, as they believed that the soul was immortal but that the body was inherently corrupt. Despite Paul's efforts to explain his message, the response from the people was mixed. Some were intrigued and wanted to hear more, while others mocked him, particularly when he mentioned the resurrection. This division among the people highlights the difficulties Paul faced in trying to communicate a message that was so radically different from their religious and philosophical traditions. One of the key reasons for the opposition to Paul's message in Athens was the deep cultural and intellectual pride of the Athenians. Athens was known for its intellectual achievements, and the Greeks saw themselves as the custodians of reason and wisdom. To challenge their religious and philosophical traditions was to question their identity as a people. In particular, the Greek philosophers, who valued intellectual debate and the search for truth through reason, found it difficult to accept the idea of a divine revelation through a crucified Savior. For them, the notion of a God who would die and be resurrected was nonsensical. Greek philosophy placed a high premium on the power of human reason to understand the world, and the concept of divine intervention in human history, particularly in the form of the death and resurrection of Jesus, seemed to undermine their intellectual framework. Furthermore, the Athenians' polytheistic beliefs made it difficult for them to accept Paul's proclamation of a single all-powerful God. The Greeks had a vast array of gods who were responsible for various aspects of life, and their gods were often depicted as capricious, engaging in human-like behaviors such as jealousy, anger, and love. The idea of a single all-encompassing deity, who was both transcendent and immanent, was a foreign concept to the Athenians, and many viewed it as incompatible with their worldview. Despite the opposition he faced, Paul did not respond with hostility or force. Instead, he used the opportunity to engage with his listeners in a respectful and thoughtful manner. His famous speech on Mars Hill, Areopagus, is a prime example of his strategy for dealing with opposition. In this speech, Paul addressed the Athenians by acknowledging their religious devotion and even referencing one of their altars, which was inscribed to an unknown god. Paul used this as a starting point to introduce the Athenians to the one true God, whom he proclaimed as the creator of the heavens and the earth. He also emphasized that this God was not distant or aloof, but rather was near to all people. This approach was both respectful and strategic. Rather than condemning the Greeks for their polytheism, Paul sought common ground by referencing their own beliefs and practices. He then used their own religious language to introduce them to the gospel message. Despite Paul's eloquent and reasoned speech, the response from his audience was largely indifferent. Some mocked him, while others expressed interest but were not immediately convinced. Paul did not force them to listen or attempt to coerce them into belief. Instead, he left the city understanding that the seeds of the gospel had been planted and that further work would be required to bring people to faith. Though Paul's visit to Athens did not result in a mass conversion, his efforts played a crucial role in the spread of Christianity throughout Greece. His message, though initially rejected by many, would resonate with others who were searching for a deeper spiritual truth. Over time, Christianity would take root in Greece, and many of the ideas Paul introduced would influence the development of Christian thought in the region. The opposition Paul faced in Athens also highlights a key aspect of the Christian message. It is not always accepted with open arms, and it often challenges the prevailing cultural and intellectual norms. However, Paul's response to this opposition, his willingness to reason, to respect, and to patiently engage with his listeners, provides a model for how Christians should approach those who reject or oppose their message.